I just start crying because the pain is so bad. I really start to wonder if I can do this. Hey guys, what's up? It's Candace from Gigglezilla, and if you're new here, I just had a baby 3 months ago. His name is Nolan, and he is the sweetest little pumpkin ever. Let me tell you about how he got here. So let's start with my due date. My due date was May 13th, 2021. Medically and personally, I had been told numerous times, with your first baby, you're gonna go past May 13th. You'll probably have your baby on the 19th or the 20th. Usually first-time moms go to about 41 weeks. I took a natural birth birthing class. In that class, she said something that really stuck with me. There has been some research that shows eating date fruit can shorten your labor time. After she left, I started Googling the research. I started listening to podcasts, reading articles all about date fruit and how it can induce your labor and how it can reduce the amount of time that you are in labor. So everything I read and listened to said start eating date fruit at 36 weeks. The reason this was so important to me is because by about 35 weeks pregnant, I was over it. I was like, there's no way I want to have this baby at 41 weeks. If there was something that could help reduce my labor time and potentially have me go into labor prior to 41 weeks, because here's the side note, I really did not want to be induced. That was something for me personally that I put in my birth plan. I would like to go into labor spontaneously. So, eating all these date fruits. At 36 weeks, I started eating 6 dates a day. Okay, I tried to put them in a smoothie. It did not work. They would not blend. I was just grabbing them and eating them. Okay, you guys, I almost barfed a couple of times. The texture, and the way that they look, it just grossed me out. But I was like, you know what? If this is gonna help me go into labor spontaneously, and if this is gonna help me get this baby out faster and reduce my labor time by up to 6 hours, I'm doing it. I will endure. I started eating them with peanut butter and cheese and just anything to kind of mask that texture and that flavor. And so I did it. 36 weeks, I started eating 6 dates a day. And you know what? April 31st, whatever the last day of April 2021 was, I went to bed totally happy and totally fine. I was like, I still have 2 weeks, maybe even 2.5 or 3 weeks left if I go longer than expected. I woke up around 11 p.m. and I was like, my stomach feels kind of weird. And it wasn't even my stomach hurts. It wasn't I'm having cramping or it feels like my uterus is contracting. None of that. It just felt different. Almost like I ate something that kind of wasn't good for me or something that made my stomach hurt. So I am like, okay, that's weird, but I'm gonna go to bed. So my husband was in the bed. I was like, hey babe, my stomach kind of hurts, but there's absolutely no way that I am in labor. There's no way I'm in labor. It's way too early. It's still April, technically, right? It's not even May 1st yet. So we go to bed. Then around 1 a.m., so 2 hours later, I woke up and I was like, you know what? My stomach still feels a little bit weird. And so in my birthing class, she said, drink a bunch of water. If your contractions or if your stomach pain goes away, then you're not in labor. You're probably just dehydrated. Drank a bunch of water, laid down, stomach pain went away, I was fine. Okay, then here it is, a little bit later, I wake my husband up. I say, hey, I'm not in labor, but my stomach is hurting rhythmically, right? Like that was what the doctor told me. How do you know you're in labor? How do you know you're in labor? As a first-time mom, I really wanted to know. And they were like, well, the pain will be rhythmic. And I was like, about every, 5 to 7 minutes or so, my stomach hurts. It's like the same type of hurt. And so I was like, but I'm not in labor. Don't worry about it. It's way too early. I am absolutely not in labor. An hour later, I don't know, maybe 2:30 a.m., he's like, I'm gonna start timing this because it seems like you might be in labor. I'm telling him, there's no way I'm in labor. And he's like, you're right, you're not in labor. We're just gonna time it just to see what happens, okay? So he starts timing it like clockwork. Every 5 minutes, I'm having pain. I didn't even call it a contraction. I was like, I'm just in pain. So he timed it for an hour. Every 5 minutes, I had pain come back. And he kept saying, but you're not in labor. And I was like, I know, I'm not in labor. I don't know what this pain is. It's super weird. Like, why is it so rhythmic? I'm not in labor. So then another hour goes by and he goes, I'm gonna call our doula. And I was like, why are you gonna bother her? I'm not in labor. There's no reason for you to call her. Like, what if she gets here and she has to go home because I'm not in labor? There's no way I'm in labor. Like, I was told that early labor, so there's 3 stages of labor. Early labor, something that can last for days or hours, especially as a first-time mom. Like, your body's like, what's going on? It's trying to figure out what it needs to do next because it's never done this before. I was like, there's no way I'm in labor. It hasn't been days. It hasn't even been hours. It's been like maybe an hour, 2 hours tops. There's no way. Why would my contractions be 5 minutes apart and I haven't even had early labor yet? So he calls texts our doula and says, hey, here's what's happening. I downloaded an app, Candace's pain, because we weren't calling it contractions yet. Candace's pain is every 5 minutes apart or so. We just want to let you know what's going on. She told Scott, she said, give Candace the phone. I want to talk to her. So he hands me the phone. Keep in mind, every 5 minutes or so, I'm having pain. So I'm braiding my hair, talking to her on the phone. And she's like, Candace, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm okay, everything's fine. I'm not in labor, don't worry about it. And then I say, hold on. Oh, just a minute. Like having to breathe through this pain. And I was like, but I'm not in labor, so don't worry about it. Oh, just a minute. Every 4 minutes at this point, like it's getting less and less, right? And she's still not here. It's only been about 3 hours from start to finish. And I'm already at my pain was already 4 minutes apart. So I'm talking to her for about 10 minutes and I have to stop a couple times. And each time she's like, that's okay. Take the time that you need. And then I would come back to the phone after breathing through my pain, right? And she said, okay, Candace, I think it's time that I come and be with you. And I said, no. Why would you come and be with me and I'm not in labor? And she goes, well, if I get there and you're not in labor, I'll just come home. It's not that big of a deal. And I was like, okay, I guess that works. Like, she's fine with it. I should be fine with it. So she gets here, and again, every 4 minutes, I'm taking a break so I can breathe. And she's like walking me through it. And then my niece lives with us. And so she says to my husband, do you have a plan for someone to come and stay with you? With your niece. My mother-in-law is going to come and pick her up and take her to my sister's house. And she told Scott, I think it's time for you to call your mother-in-law. And I stopped and I said, wait a minute. And I looked at her, I said, am I in labor? And she said, yes, you're in labor. And I couldn't believe it. I said, but early labor is the first stage and it's supposed to last for hours and days, And she goes, sometimes it doesn't go that way. And I was like, oh, that's actually a really good thing. My body is progressing quickly. That's exactly what I want. My mother-in-law came, took my niece, and then the pain. Whew. I was in active labor, you guys. I thought I was still in early labor. I had been in active labor for a few hours and did not even know it, okay? That pain kicked up about 5 notches, okay? I was literally crawling on the floor because I could not walk anymore, okay? And she had this machine, I can't think of what it's called, but it sends like electromagnetic waves through my back. I think it's called the TENS machine, TENS, and it sends electromagnetic waves through my back because I was having back labor. My stomach didn't hurt, my back was hurting. So then at this point, I get diarrhea, okay? I am diarrheaing all over the place. Thank God for my freaking husband. And then I started vomiting. And she said, that's great. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. I'm like, what? And then I started bleeding from my lady parts. Okay, so it is coming out of everywhere. All these fluids are just like coming out of everywhere. And she said, that's what's supposed to happen. Your body is clearing itself out for the baby to come down, right? And I'm like, this is terrible. I'm in excruciating pain. I have diarrhea. I am bleeding from my private parts and I'm vomiting, okay? I was on the toilet with a garbage can. Like, it was kind of terrible. I knew this was going to happen though, because in my birthing class, she prepared us very well. She was like, here's what's gonna happen. Here's how you'll know you're in active labor. You're gonna start vomiting and you might get diarrhea. Ding! That's exactly what happened, okay? Knowledge really is power. So at that point, she goes, she knew that I wanted to labor at home as long as possible. I had my birth plan, I sent it to her, and I said to her, I want to labor at home as long as possible because I want to, as much as I can, bring down the possibility that I'm going to have interventions. The longer you're in the hospital, the higher the chances go up that they're gonna start intervening, right? Like, well, you've been laboring for this long, it's time to try something else, you're not progressing, failure to progress, all of those things that they say to us. And so I said, I'm gonna labor at home as long as possible because I want an unmedicated birth. We're laboring. At one point, I stop, I look at my husband. I'm laying on the floor, mind you, because I'm in so much pain with this TENS machine on my back, vibrating, trying to release some of that pain. And I look at him, I just grab him around the neck. I pull, and this makes me a little bit emotional. I pull him in close to me, and I just start crying because the pain is so bad. I really start to wonder if I can do this. I said I want an unmedicated birth, right? Like, millions of women do it. Why can't I? And I just look at him in his eyes and I just bawl my eyes out. I just cry through the contraction and he just sits there and he holds me. And then the contraction is over and I gave my doula a few affirmations, and at this point she starts reciting my affirmations back to me. She's like, you are strong, Christ is with you, you've done really hard things, you can get through this as well. And then I started saying, I can get through this, I can do this, I've done really hard things in my life and I didn't quit. And she goes, that's right, you didn't quit, you endured. And so it gave me an extra push of strength to have my husband holding me, to have my doula reciting my affirmations back to me, right? It was really a beautiful moment. It was excruciatingly terrible pain, but I felt so good that I had my support system and my support team with me. And so then she goes, I know you want to labor at home as long as possible. Do you want to stay or do you want to go to the hospital? And I said, I think I can stay. Let me tell you the truth. I was afraid to go to the hospital because I started thinking, what if I can't do this? I now know my body is designed to do this and would do it. It will push this baby out. And I started thinking, what if we get to the hospital and I'm only 2 centimeters? I can't go much longer in this pain, right? If I'm only 2 centimeters and the pain is going to get progressively worse until I reach 10, I'm not gonna make it. That was my thought. And she said, well, if we get to the hospital and you are only 2 centimeters dilated, we'll just come back home and labor here. And I was like, I can't, I won't make it. I knew I was about ready to tap out. So by this point, it's 4:30 in the morning, and we labored for a few more, 45 more minutes at home. And then we got to a point, she said, I'm watching your demeanor and your demeanor is changing. You're no longer smiling, your contractions are about 2 minutes apart at this point. And then she goes, I think it's time for us to go. Like, we need to get into the car and go. And I was like, I don't think I can get to the car. Like, I could barely walk, you guys. Like, I'm literally crawling from room to room because the pain is so bad. I heard him say to her, is she gonna be able to make it to the car? Is she gonna be okay in the car? And my doula said no. She is not gonna like anything that happens from here on out. She's gonna hate the car ride. You know, like, she's in so much pain. She's not gonna like it, but we gotta get to the hospital. So I try to get to the car and I drop to all fours because the contraction is coming every 2 minutes, right? And so then I walk to the car. I get to the car outside. Again, another contraction comes. I'm like, I'm not gonna make it. So I get in the car and sit down, and that is when I just went into la la land. Like, the pain was so bad. I was just like in a daze. Like, I knew where I was, but I wasn't fully aware of what was going on around me. I look at my husband in the car on the way to the hospital, and I said, is it okay if I get an epidural? The pain was so intense. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, every laboring woman reaches the point, at least for an unmedicated birth, where she says, I can't do this. And I had already told my husband, and our birthing coach had already told us, you're gonna reach this point. Here's what you need to do, Scott. Like, here's what you need to say to her, remind her of what she wants, because she's gonna really believe she can't do this. So I said, can I get an epidural? Like, is it okay with you? And here's the thing, I didn't need his permission. I needed permission for myself to verbalize that it's okay if it doesn't go according to plan. And I needed him to not be disappointed in me. And I knew he wouldn't be no matter what happened, but I didn't want to think, oh my gosh, he's so disappointed because I said I wanted a natural labor. We paid all this money for all these classes and all this prep work we did. And then I get here and I'm like, I can't do it. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, you can get an epidural, as to say, you can, of course, but I know that's not what you want, okay? And in that moment, it was kind of empowering because at some point, you just have to give in to the pain. Like, I just had to stop fighting the pain and just say, you know what? If I need an epidural, I'm gonna freaking get an epidural. Like, and just be done with it, okay? I knew I wasn't going to, but I needed to be okay if I needed to. So we get to the hospital, we park out front, I get out of the car, I'm in the parking lot, and I drop to all fours. You guys, I don't know how to describe this pain other than a gunshot to your pelvis, like point blank, okay? Like, it was so, oh my God, I couldn't even walk into the hospital. I was on all fours in the parking lot on the cement. Like, I wasn't wailing yet, but I knew I was getting to the point where I was gonna start screaming because the pain hurt. It hurt so bad. So then I heard the security guard say, does she need a wheelchair? Yes, I need a freaking wheelchair. Like, go get me a wheelchair. I can't walk. So Scott comes out with the wheelchair. I can barely get in the wheelchair. Okay, this is the part where I really got irritated because with all of the COVID precautions, like you have to stand there, have to take your temperature, they gotta ask for your name and check you in. Is that a clean mask? You know, it felt like an eternity when you're in labor and they're sitting there asking all these questions to your husband and to you, and you're like, just take my temperature and get me upstairs, okay? So that I can get this baby out. So then they move me along, I go upstairs, I go into triage, and the lady says, I'm gonna have to check you. And I'm like, check me where? Because all the pain I feel all up in my body, I don't want nobody sticking nothing up in there, okay? She's like, I have to check you, I have to see how dilated you are. And I was like, dude, like, oh my God, like it makes your toes curl to think about it. Like, so I was like, okay. She goes, I'll wait until your next contraction comes down, because contractions are like waves, right? Like they go up, they come down, they go up, they come down. Okay, the contraction is done, go ahead. This was the most aggressive check I've ever had in my life, okay? I didn't know it, but I have I think it's called a posterior cervix. So my cervix kind of sticks back here. Some people stick right here. So she's trying to find my cervix and she can't freaking find it. And I'm like, like get your hand out of there, lady, because I'm about to punch somebody. So she takes her hand out. My midwife comes in And she's like, you know, it felt like a movie. Like, there's just a lot going on. People coming in and out of the room. Like, I don't even know where Scott is at this point. Like, they're hooking you up to stuff and like checking the baby's heart rate and like checking your, like, all this stuff they're doing. And I'm like out of it, but I still vaguely remember it. And she said to the midwife, I can't find her cervix. I don't know how dilated she is. So the midwife says, okay, I'm gonna have to check her. And I was like, okay. It was bad enough that one person had to check me. Now a second person has to check me. And so at that point, I'm like, where's Scott? Because I didn't know where he was. And then he's like, I'm right here. He was just sitting there. I was like, okay, good. Because he's like my person. Okay, makes me emotional. But I was so happy to know that he was in the room with me, even though I couldn't see him or touch him because I'm laying on a hospital bed. So then she checks me and she goes, you're about 7.5, 8 centimeters dilated. And I was like, holy, oh my God. I was so relieved because I was like, I freaking did it. Like, I'm 8 centimeters dilated. I haven't had any medication. You know, like that was what I wanted for myself. I wanted an unmedicated birth. And I'm 8 centimeters, and now I don't have to go back home. They're not gonna send me home. Like, that's what went through my head. And then in my birthing class, she also talked about what's called transition. And that's the hardest part of labor, the shortest part, but when the contractions are the closest together, right? So it's about 20 minutes, sometimes up to 3 hours, but your contractions are about a minute, minute and a half apart. And then you get like a 30-second break in between, and then they come right back. It feels like one super long contraction. So I knew that if I was 8 centimeters, I was almost done. I was like, okay, so I got about 2 centimeters left to go. I can freaking do this, dude. Like, I got excited and terrified all at the same time. After that, they were like, get her in a room. But like, they just started moving really quickly because at 8 centimeters, the baby can come in 5 minutes, it can come in 30 minutes, right? So at this point, I think it's about 6:30, maybe 7 o'clock in the morning, and they hook the baby heart rate monitor up, and then they do my COVID test, or at some point they did the COVID test, and then I give them my birth plan, and they go, I see here that you don't want Pitocin. And I said, no, I don't, because I had learned in my birthing class about something called expected management, and it's basically when they give you Pitocin, and again, I'm not a doctor, but they give you Pitocin to help deliver the placenta after birth. That's the 3rd stage of labor, right? Like when you deliver your placenta. I didn't want it because they give it to you kind of preemptively so that you don't bleed too much or bleed out. I had a fibroid on my uterus, so they were worried. Sometimes with a fibroid, you can bleed a lot right after delivery. They were worried that if I didn't have it, I would bleed too much. And I said, no, let's wait and see if I actually need it, right? Like, I don't want something preemptively. Like, let's wait and see if I actually need it and then give it to me. So they were kind of pushing back on it, but thank goodness for my birthing coach. She's Molly Ray Birthing Services. She was like, you need to feel empowered to advocate for yourself. This is your birth. This is your delivery. This is just another day for them at the hospital. They will deliver 5 babies after you. You know, this is your one chance at having your first baby. So have it the way you want, as long as it's safe for you and safe for baby. And so I said, no, I don't want Pitocin. And they're like, okay, you know. I didn't want to be hooked up to an IV. I wanted to be able to move around, and I was okay with a saline lock. Like, in case something happened and they needed to get an IV in me quickly, I had the saline lock there, but there's nothing hanging from me. She's trying to get the needle in, and keep in mind, I'm in contractions. I'm like 8.5 centimeters dilated at this point. She's trying to get the needle in to put the saline lock in, and she can't get it. So she keeps poking me, and I'm like, dude, I'm in the worst pain of my life. And, you know, and I wasn't moving. I was being as still as I could. And she got it, and she's like, oh, shoot, it didn't work. I gotta try again. So she kept trying. She finally got it in, and then she pulled it out, and whatever was in there that was supposed to come out didn't come out, so it's stuck in my arm. And she's like, don't move, I gotta get somebody to help get this thing out of your arm. And I was like, I'm really about to punch somebody. Like, I don't know what else to do, okay? Like, I need y'all to get it together. And they were wonderful. I was just in a lot of pain, so everything is exasperated, right? Like, they were perfectly fine. The lady came, they took it out, and then I was fine. And so then I'm like, has my water broken yet? Because in the movies, the water breaks, you get rushed to the hospital, you're screaming down the hallway. Like, I was like, did my water break? And they're like, we don't know. Do you feel any fluid? We're not sure. And so I didn't want them to break my water. Again, I wanted it to be spontaneous. That was part of my birth plan. And so I was like, I don't know. Eventually, I get to the point where I'm on all fours. That is the most comfortable position for me at that point because I had back labor. My back was hurting so freaking bad. It wasn't even my stomach. It was all in my back, okay? So I was on all fours and I'm moaning through these contractions, and I kind of compare it to the movie 300 when they're like in battle and they're just like yelling and roaring, and that was what I started to do. I started to scream and moan because I was about 9 centimeters at this point, all right? And so my midwife is in there, these nurses are in there, my doula is right here talking me through these contractions, my husband is right here in my other ear telling you what a great job I'm doing. I don't know why it makes me so emotional. I just felt, I felt so supported, I felt safe, I felt important, which I know is kind of a strange feeling to have during labor, but I felt so much love in that room. Like, it's kind of hard to describe when you have so many people cheering for you and allowing you to have the kind of labor and delivery that you want. No one was pushing anything on me at this point. They were supporting me in what I said I wanted, which was an unmedicated, natural, as natural as can be, labor and delivery. And so the contractions are getting really bad and I'm starting to tense up. And my doula says, I've noticed that when the contraction comes, you get really tense. She goes, instead of getting tense, I want you to breathe and just kind of bear down through those contractions. Like, push when you feel that contraction coming. Don't go like this. She goes, push, like push it down, okay? I'm about 9.5 centimeters at this point. So I was like, oh, okay. So then I'm on all fours. I feel a contraction coming. And she goes, you feel it coming? I want you to push. I push like my life depends on it. All the research I've done has said, do not try to push cute if you want to have a faster labor, right? And I was like, okay, if I'm gonna push, I'm gonna push. So I pushed as hard as I could. My water breaks everywhere. Fluids all over the table, all over the floor, all over my legs because I'm on all fours at this point. And then they see meconium in the fluid, which basically I think is like when the baby poops in utero, like they poop inside their sac. And so when the fluid came out, they had like brown, it's like brown water. And so then they went and got the NICU unit just in case. So then 3 additional people are in the room with me. And keep in mind, you guys, like, I'm on all fours. I have no pants on. I have no underwear on. My butthole is just up, all in the air for about 14 people to see, okay? Like, and when you are pushing, this is real graphic, so if your babies is watching this, cover their ears. When you are pushing, you're not just pushing in one area, like your butthole is also pushing. Like that whole pelvic area is pushing. So I started to poop a little bit, just a little bit. Just a little bit, okay? But I had read that you're gonna poop during labor. The nurses, midwives don't care. They see it all day. I just didn't want to poop, y'all, but I did a little bit. So I heard my midwife say, can you get her a wipe? I think she needs a wipe. So I felt the midwife like, she wiped my butt crack, okay? Apparently it was just a little bit. My husband had to see it. I had warned him about the beautiful gruesomeness of labor. So he was fully aware of what may happen that day. So she wipes me, I'm pushing, my water broke. The NICU unit comes in, 3 additional people are in the room, and then they're like, okay, now her water has broken. Now you can really push. So the midwife is like, if you want to push as hard as you want to. At this point, that baby is ready to come out. So I'm pushing. So then they tell me, lay on my side and like hold up my leg and push that way. So I tried that. I said, you know what? That's not gonna work. My body is telling me that I need to be on all fours, and that is what I'm gonna do. So they're like, okay, go ahead. So I got back on all fours. And when I push, strangely enough, the contractions went away. Okay? So at this point, I'm like, yo, like, this is it. Like, I am about to make this touchdown. The contractions went away. So I pushed so freaking hard. And then I didn't want to stop pushing. Like, I didn't want to take a break from pushing because I knew if I stopped pushing, I was going to feel that pain in my back again. So I'm pushing. Then I take a short break, and then I start pushing again, and then like, we can see the head. And you guys, I knew the moment would come when I would hear those words, but I was in awe of my freaking body. At that point, I was like, this body is so powerful. Like, I felt so empowered when I heard them say we can see the head, because I had labored and now I'm at the point of delivery. Like, this was the point that I was terrified to reach. I was like, oh my God, when I get to labor, when I get to the delivery part, like, I was scared. I said, I only want one kid because I only want to go through excruciating pain once like that. The head started to come out. The midwife, or my doula, was like, Scott, come around and look. You can see the baby's head, you know. So the head is hanging out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I reached this point. This is amazing. So then I give another push, and then his shoulder starts to come out. And then I push one more time, and I look down, and he is on the table. And I just lost it. Like, I started crying uncontrollably because I couldn't believe I actually did it. You know, like, I couldn't believe this birth, this labor and delivery actually went according to plan. Like, almost everything went perfectly. It was supernatural. It was such a blessing. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I was so thankful. I was just like, thank you, Jesus, for thinking enough of me to allow me to bring life into this world. Like, all those cliches are so true when they say you have a baby. So I'm looking down, I'm like, that's my baby. Like, it was this unreal moment. I've taken care of kids for a long time in my life. Other people's children, right? It's never been my own child. I'm looking down and this baby is like laying on the table. And then Scott cuts the umbilical cord, and then they move him over to the warmer with the NICU because there was meconium in the water, in the fluid when the water broke. And I wanted immediate skin to skin. That's probably the one thing that didn't happen exactly as I thought that it would. They like check him and all this stuff, and then I hear my husband say, because I had preached to him so much about the golden hour, like, I need the golden hour. Like, there's so much bonding that happens with your baby immediately on your chest right after birth, right? Like, within that first hour, there's a lot of chemical releases that his body releases, that my body releases, that bonds us for life. It was so important to me to have that, right? Like, all the oxytocin is flowing. I need my baby on my chest. And so when he came out and they took him to the warmer, he went over to the warmer and he goes, the mom wants the baby. And they're like, okay, we're just checking him real quick. So then he waited about 10 seconds and he goes, no, she wants the baby now. And they're like, okay, we're gonna take him over just a second. And then they start measuring him. All of this stuff that can be done after the golden hour. Like, if you don't know this, they don't have to do measurements immediately after birth. They can wait to do that stuff after you and baby have bonded, if that's what you request. And that was in my birth plan. So Scott was like gung-ho, like, get that baby over to her. It had been about 2.5 minutes at this point. Or maybe even less. It felt like an eternity though, because I'm staring at my baby on this table that I had just delivered, and he's not on my chest, right? So Scott's like, no, she wants the baby now. So then they pick him up, put him on my chest, and I was just like, holy crap, like, this is my freaking baby, you know? And I just said, I don't know. I was just like in awe. I don't know how to describe it. I don't have the words for it. So then I think it's important at this point to note, the reason they wanted to give me Pitocin was so that my placenta could deliver, right? So the baby's on my chest for about 5 minutes and I'm not bleeding out, right? So I'm like, at this point, I didn't really need the Pitocin, you know? And so they're like talking about my placenta, and I said, oh, do you want me to push it out? Because that's what I had seen. I had watched videos on how to deliver your, yes, I'm that person. I made Scott watch one too. Sorry, Scott. On how the placenta is delivered. And I was like, do you want me to push it out? And she's like, can you? And I was like, sure. I just pushed the placenta right out. It just came out on the table, and she was like, wow, okay. And so at this point, I'm thinking, I knew I didn't need the Pitocin to get my placenta out of my body. Like, my body knows what to do, and if I did need the Pitocin, let's take it after my body shows you that it needs help, right? So anyway, deliver the placenta. I'm holding my baby, and I'm just like, I couldn't believe I actually did it. I couldn't believe it went according to plan. And I couldn't believe all of the support and the love that I had around me. I'm holding him for about 30 minutes, just looking at his sweet little face, and then he pees on me. And I was like, yep, this is my boy. So by the time baby is out, it has been about maybe 6.5, 7 hours or so from active labor to delivery. Having a short labor like that is very rare for first-time moms, and I have to attribute it to the grace of God on my body. Like, oh my God, thank you. And those dates, those date fruits that I was eating. If you're not sure about date fruit, like, do some research on it. I was like, even if it doesn't work, it's worth a shot, right? So on average, it's reduced labor by up to 6 hours. It's been proven to shorten early labor, which guess what? That's exactly what happened to me. Like, I pretty much skipped early labor, went right into active labor. You definitely want to talk to your doctor before starting to eat all these dates. But anyway, date fruit. All right, guys, subscribe to this channel. Thank you.